to enjoy the weekend. And the moment is here on LinkedIn Happy Hour. I don't know, guys, can you believe that it's almost going to be a year since we started working from home? I mean, that also means that it's almost going to be a year since we started working remotely. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of getting used to it. And the only thing that I still miss is the face to face interaction with my colleagues, those random chats by the coffee machine, and of course, those Friday drinks before saying goodbye to the weekend. That's why we created Friday Happy Hour here on LinkedIn to connect with our peers, motivate each other, and maintain this fun ritual. Now, for those joining us for the first time, with Locals for Teams is a platform that connects teams and cultures by providing highly engaging and interactive virtual experiences for teams to keep employees connected, engaged, and productive. Now, with a combination of cutting edge technology and a rich network of passionate hosts from all around the world, we provide a rich diversity of experience designed for different purposes. So whether working remotely has its pros, right? But many companies are still navigating how to maintain this and how to keep the culture alive. So whether you aim to maintain your team's bond and connection, offer them ways to chill down, and charging their energy and caring for their wellness, or simply keeping on inspiring and motivating them, our experiences are key to meet all of your expectations. Now, I'm very, very excited about today's happy hour. This happy hour is special. Why? Because this is not our regular experiences. Today we have a special guest joining us. And I want to introduce you guys to Charis Fontes. She's joining us from San Francisco to share with us her valuable knowledge and experience about inclusive workplace cultures. So today's happy hour is all about cultural celebrations at work. Now, when you ask Cherise what does she do, she says, I'm a human. That's how she defines her role both in life and at work. So if you guys are curious to know more, I would suggest to go and check her LinkedIn profile because that's actually how we found her. So, and today happy hour, we have this special, beautiful human as a guest. I want to introduce you guys. So, hi, Cherise. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I think, yeah, as I mentioned before, I think we were doing this research on LinkedIn and we came across an article of yours that talk about, okay, Black History Month.
Mhm.
And the theme of today is like, well, Black History Month has passed because we celebrated on February. So what now? What do we do next? It's not just a month thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the article, I give some really helpful tips that companies can do for Black History Month, but with the mindset of it's not just Black History Month. I think
Mm-hmm.
the challenge that I face and have faced with Black History Month is it's only been a month. We pack in so much stuff. It's usually, talk about this growing up. It was very traumatic in terms of the stuff that they would show us. It wasn't very celebratory. And
Yeah.
so it was, and some of that stuff still happens today. It's like, oh, we're going to bring up everything negative about Black history. And then we're going to bring up some highlights of some of the people that you guys have probably already seen: Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, about civil rights. And it's just not, it's not my favorite
No.
month.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
yeah, so I basically think the way that I wrote this article was so companies could celebrate Black History Month the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to take this template that I put together and insert any other culture. So if you wanted to celebrate, the 12th was Chinese New Year. So the template of education, film and books and food and community, all of that can be applied to any culture. And it just adds a full, robust ability for companies to continue the celebration and also look at Black History Month as, and, depending on where you are in America, Black history is American history. It's
Yeah.
not this separate silo that, oh, the Black people did this over here. It was, we were on the same land as everyone else.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I wanted to mention because as I was reading your article, it said, yeah, Black history is American history. I mean, me as I'm Mexican American, so I mean, I know all about this background, but now working for an international company and now having an international audience, how do we apply Black history into a global working culture?
Okay. That's a really good question. The first thing that comes to my mind is focus on celebratory. Do not bring up trauma, things that are like negative things. You want to keep anything you talk about with Black history or just current Black events, do your best to balance it out with positive. So if you go back and look at some of the materials that I've posted over the last month, all of it is celebratory. It's highlighting humans that
Yeah,
might have not known, like Mary Fields. She was amazing. I mean, they should make a movie about this woman. Um, but like, I think if companies that aren't in the US, just make sure the information that you're getting is celebratory. It's highlighting Black culture, it's celebrating Black culture. And if you do have to bring in historical events that might not have been as positive, make sure you transcend that and lead it to something that is positive. So if you're going to show a negative, make sure it leans into a positive so you can really anchor both sides of the picture. So it's not just a one-sided Black
definitely.
trauma, this is where it was. It's like fully the spectrum. And there's enough out there. There's a lot of Black people out there.
Yeah, I think it's also like I mean, for my opinion, sometimes in history and school, we are only shown that side, that negative side, right? And then now that it sounds a bit wrong, but diversity is something that a lot of companies are now working on, which, by the way, it should have been way before. How do we, yeah, look for those positives?
Look for the positive. I mean, I think that's probably the easiest way is if you see something. So I just posted something. Here's a beautiful
Mhm,
example. So my daughter, the school decided to team up with, I believe, a Microsoft to do showcase Black History Month.
mhm.
But when she came in and she was kind of telling me a little bit of what they were showing, and I was like, okay, talking to her a little bit about it. But eventually, they ended up showing a crowd of Black people being attacked by German shepherds, and we have a German shepherd, and her mom is Black. So it was like, okay, that's not what's the point of them showing that? What was the that's obviously not positive. Um, and it really bothered her. So what I think is showing the positives in as much as you can, because the news and the media will paint probably not a very good picture, and this is where a lot of our biases are imbalanced, and we get misinformation about other humans. So I would say seek out the positives. Look at what and most people can distinguish between what's a negative and a positive. What my daughter watched was negative.
Yeah, of
So
course.
I went and found, it took me less than 5 minutes. I found about 6 or 7 women, Black women, that did amazing things throughout history. So I balanced that out. And it took me about, like I said, 5 minutes to do so. So if you're going to invest money and time, I would encourage companies to seek out as much positive content as they can around any culture, because then that's how we're learning. We're learning through the information that's presented to us. And so we have a responsibility, companies have a responsibility to either show that information in a positive light or a negative light.
Yeah, that's completely true. So I think I want to go more into how do we celebrate in general cultural. I mean, yeah, like I mentioned before, we are a very multicultural company, so we have plenty of cultures to go to. Is there something that you can give us some examples on how cultural celebrations at work are essential for inclusion and equity goals? I mean, and also for the audience out there, if you have any questions or you have any comments about this topic, please let us know, and I can also pass it along to Cherise.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to my mind is food. All cultures
Of
have
course.
food. I mean, I grew up in the Bay Area. So at the time that I grew up, I would say there was the United Nations in the area that I was. I could go down the street and have Filipino food. I could go to another house and have Ethiopian food. Like, we were a rich culture. I grew up very, very fortunate. My kids aren't experiencing that same that same experience, but I grew up around different cultures, and food always brought us together. My husband is Portuguese, and so there's a big Portuguese community out here in the Bay, and it's all about food. You don't go to the festival and not eat, and you don't go to a different, and it's transcendence. Food transcends humans, and it also helps us to just connect and feel safe. You don't chew unless you feel safe. So that also allows cultures to come together, and we can all talk about different parts of our food. And even if you aren't, don't know what food tradition is within your culture, you can still learn and
Yeah.
learn about other people's foods and adopt other people's cultures, other people's foods. For you mentioned that you're Mexican American, my mother-in-law was adopted by a Mexican family. So our tradition is the tamales and around the
Oh,
holidays. And like, it's like a big thing. And so I obviously don't look,
yeah.
you would assume, but I've adopted other cultures and other foods. And I would say companies easily, remote
Yeah.
or in person, can start with food. You can do a remote cooking class. I just did one for a client partner. We made gumbo. We made my great-great-grandmother's gumbo recipe.
Oh my
And
God.
and I talked about the history of that. So like in the article, you can start with food. Food transcends. It brings people together. There's unity in our humanity, and it just really helps. Everyone eats, right? Like, no matter what it looks like.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Charisse, I don't know, you just did this to me, that now I'm thinking about tamales, and it's something that I think as humans, I mean, we really connect. It's nostalgic. I mean, for me also being away from home and all
Mhm.
these cultures, it's also a good way to kind of open yourself up and create a bond in the workplace that transcends more than just someone working next to you. So I would also like to know from your opinion. I mean, yeah, we talk about on the article, you also talk, I think, if I remember correctly, we have also movies, um, we have books. What another thing that you mentioned? I mean, just so we can give a bit of more examples into how we can include this into the workplace.
Yes. So I basically start with education,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then go into film and books. So you could either start a book club on something, but let's say you guys are pressed for time, or you might not
Yeah.
like to read. There's also audiobook as an option, but movies are, I mean, less than 3 hours, and they take us through so much of a journey. And like, I know Pixar does a beautiful job. In 7 minutes or less, will either have you crying, laughing, or both,
I know.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
film really, really helps. And you can do, in the article, I think I point out like questions that you can ask after you watch a film together. I think cooking, and I bring up gumbo because gumbo is a format of a stew, and stews are throughout every culture that I've
Yeah.
ever encountered. So cooking together. I also think that um, again, highlighting the positive components of a celebration and know what a celebration is. Talk about, like, when someone turns a certain age, you don't take them to a cemetery and talk about all the people that died before them. Don't
Yeah.
you don't celebrate that way. That would be ridiculous. So why celebrate? When you think of celebrate. When you think of honor, honor. So there's a little bit of a difference there, and I think cleaning up those definitions. I would also do maybe something that showcases different cultures. So one of the things that I love doing when I talk about culture and tribe within the workplace is I love showing the haka, and I give this
Mm.
beautiful story of the haka and how it was created 100 years ago from this chief to a son, and what it means now, and how it's transcended over different centuries or decades,
Mhm.
more so like decades. And so if there's something music, bringing in different types
Yes.
of music, in the Bay Area where I live, there was this Fremont Street Eats, and they would play music. And again, it was a very enriched, rich culturally, and we would play anywhere from 80s hip hop to Punjabi music, and we would all dance. And music really brings people together. You don't need to know the words. You don't need to know all the words. Like, music really, other than food, brings it in. So I would encourage companies to follow just the template of education, film and book, meals, cooking, and bringing in food. And then the last thing, community. What can you guys do as a culture that will enrich your community? So Humanity Power does and is planning this community hub where we, no matter where we are, we can clean up our community. We
Yeah.
could offer meals to other people. We can do whatever we can, but it's like us coming together separately, but in the same space of helping out our community and seeing what our communities need. Because again, there is unity in our community. There's unity in our humanity. Bringing that together, it really helps enrich cultures within the companies.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think, I mean, sometimes we need to burst our own bubble of just my culture and to open your eyes to what other cultures are all about. So I think that goes to my next question, which I want to know, what's your opinion on how these cultural celebrations can help companies? I mean, what can they achieve by implementing this in their DEI goals?
So that's a very complex question,
Yes.
because it's almost like, why should we be nice to people in the workplace?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then when you think of DEI, I have a lot of thoughts on that, more thoughts than time. But I wouldn't look at it as we're doing this for our diversity initiative.
Mhm.
I wouldn't look at it as we're doing this for our equity. It's like, you have humans in the workplace. Those humans want to be seen, heard, and witnessed. They have a macro and micro culture within inside of them, and to really have your people show up, that means all of them. That means, I mean, not every component of them, but most of their being. And I think companies should celebrate cultures because they are a collective of cultures. And to deny one side of the culture is to deny another side. And I think if you tie it to DE and I, sometimes it can get unsustainable. But if you just say, this is our culture, to celebrate all the cultures within, as many cultures as want to be acknowledged, right? Like, it's also a conversation. We want to start celebrating cultures. Do you want to share your culture with us? And if they do, great. You won't have to worry about getting it wrong. And again, many people get Black History Month wrong because they're asking the wrong questions, or they're not looking at it from a lens of celebratory.
Yeah.
So my answer to that is, you have humans, treat humans well, and treating humans well means seeing them in all facets. And the culture is one of the things that will transcend our humanity. And so why not bring it in? Because the more that you make people feel included, the more you start to grow the diverse set of your humanity.
Yeah, that's true. And I think like you said, I mean, sometimes how I see this DEI thing is more of a number that we need to achieve, and this kind of things that is like a check mark, right? So, speaking of that, what would be the right way to communicate this? Because I know, like, I mean, companies are implementing this, right? I mean, this is happening. So, in what way can companies implement these things and approach their employees without saying like, hey, so today we want to celebrate 3 things and this is our goal?
Well, I think first, shifting the narrative from DEI, I think that just has a lot of different stuff attached to it. So maybe just cleaning that up a bit and just saying, we're going to focus on inclusion as a company, because by nature, diversity, equity, equality all follows under that. So I would say we want to enrich our inclusion by celebrating cultures within the workplace. And if employers are bringing this, or people ops teams are bringing this to the people, I would encourage them to go first. So whatever culture they hold true or find close to their heart, they share that. Like, I'm going to start here. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we want to do it. Again, the format is there. Start with education, move to film and books, and it could be whatever, and then move into food, and then go into community, and rinse and repeat with any type of culture. So that way, it's not this one time, one hit wonder, check the box thing. It's something that you can now take where someone's like, hey, I want to celebrate the Portuguese culture. Okay, great. Let's start with history. Let's go into, which could include history and language. Well, I was learning Spanish for a while, and then I was like, wait, Portuguese is completely different than Spanish. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me just stick with Spanish. But maybe go into teaching someone in the history, like different languages and how they all intertwine. And then going into, again, books and films, but finding ones that are an accurate depiction of the culture and not a stereotypical type of thing. And then I would go again into food that transcends, and you can teach anyone how to make something, something simple, and then go into community. Here's what we can do for the community. And so insert anything from there. But I would encourage companies, if you want to do something like this, if you don't have Black History Month be a one-off, and you do feel like celebrating other cultures, use this template and you can apply it to literally anything.
Yeah,
start with your own. So that way you go first. You put yourself out there first. Don't always expect other people to go first. And I like to tell my tribe, I won't do anything. I won't ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And so I think one way for companies to really help anchor that is to go first. Let the CEO go first. Let the CEO talk about their culture and what it means to them, and then ask for collaborators. Say, hey, we want to collaborate. That doesn't mean you pick out the one person and they do all of the work. That means you collaborate. What else? Talk to me more about it. Interview them. Do a 3-minute interview and share it out. There's so many creative ways, but if we get trapped into this box of checking numbers and focusing on metrics, we will never see the humanity that is right in front of us. Companies are like, we want more diversity. Just open your eyes.
Yeah.
You have the diversity right in front of you. What you are lacking is the inclusion to celebrate what you have.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's like the approach sometimes is, I think in an old way before, how things used to be, it was like work, work, work. You're here as an employee. This is what you have to do. But then again, we're opening ourselves to this new approach, let's say. Sometimes I feel weird to say new when it should have been applied before, right? But now that this is happening, it's like you said, it's right in front of you.
Yeah, it's always been. And, I just think about how some companies seem to overcomplicate the simplicities of humanity because we've been detached from that for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, be human. Well, human requires vulnerability and heart. And business has told us you cannot do business vulnerable. You cannot do business with heart, numbers, money, metrics, profit. That's what we need to focus on. And that is this new generation that's coming up is like, wait a minute, no, I want to do something meaningful and impactful, and truth that if we start to focus and shift a little bit more on the humanity in the workplace, it becomes it creates a completely different ecosystem where businesses can thrive and be successful. Because unless your company is ran by robots, humans are the variable.
Yeah.
Right? Humans are the variable. And so it makes a lot more sense to put a little bit more upfront energy into the humanity. That doesn't mean that you're, in a kumbaya circle, everybody circle up. It doesn't mean that. It just means like, hey, I see you as a human. I'm going to treat you like a human. When I'm conflicted between profit and people, I'm going to really look at the human and see what I can do there, because the profit will always come. The profit will always flow if the energy and the manifestation is right. That's what I believe. The human is untapped. The human has so much potential. And I think if companies I know if companies just shift a little bit more to that humanity, they'll start to see them blossom. I look at my kids and can you imagine if I just treated them like, nope, you're this, you're that, you're this, they would never grow into the humans that they're meant to be. That never stops in the workplace. We're just humans in a business. And we make up that business. And so companies really do owe it to, and this transcends culturally. It doesn't just focus on in the US. It's international. You treat people better, you get better.
Yeah, and I think as companies, they need to remember that we don't all fit in one mold. There's so many, and I think that's why we can go on with this whole DEI. I mean, it's just not about color. It's about so many other things, right? That, we need to first educate ourselves as to what other things DEI touches, because then if we're gonna focus on this, it's still not enough. So I think one step is to first define by ourselves or educate ourselves on what is diversity and inclusion.
Yes, I think there's a step before education, and maybe it falls into the same step, is rethink the words that we're using around that. I talked about using the word minority.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear it out there, but I have my little humans out there, and let me just tell you, they're adorable. And imagine one of them comes in and I say, "Hey, little minority," you would be like, "Did she just call her kid a minority?"
Yeah.
We're not going to say it to someone that we love. Why would we say it to someone that deserves just as much love? Right. And we're using this word very fluently in the construct of diversity, inclusion, and equity. I think we need to stop we need to look at the words that we're using, because we're not making the progress that we need to make. My mom is in her 60s, and she was telling me that she's like, Sharice, we've done this diversity thing before. It was called affirmative action way back then. So we're doing the same exact thing. We're not transcending to higher consciousness.
Yeah, we're just rebranding it.
It's just exactly. I talked about the N-word. I'm not going to say it on here. I'm not going to say it at all. But like I talked about the N-word, but colored and Negro came from that word. It's just a different variation of it. So we're not really making the progress. One, we know we're not making the progress we need to make, but the reason why we're not making this progress is because we're continuing to recycle low vibrational content and methodology and expecting it to really transcend into something that's tactical or game changing in the workplace. So companies are like, we tried to do this. Well, you tried to do it with a very, very primitive model and language that doesn't serve where we currently are as humans.
Yeah, it's like F for effort. But okay, so right now our time is running out, Sharice. But I think as Emmy and our audience is saying, well, next month we have Women's History Month. So guys, here you go. We just talked about it. Now it's your turn to implement these things. Just be a human, like Sharice said. And yeah, before you go, Sharice, is there something else that you want to say? I also want to encourage people to check out your article. I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, sharing space with me. And it's not a hard problem. It's a heart problem. So, we're celebrating Women's History Month next week, starting on Monday. Mm-hmm. Just take the article and just switch Black History Month out with Women's History, and you will do perfectly fine. Do not overthink it. There is unity in our humanity. Last thing I want to say is slay the ego, because the ego caused a lot of trouble for us. Raise the humanity. You got this. Thank you for having me. Light, love, and gratitude.
Thank you so much, Cherise. And you guys can find the article. It's going to be posted, the link in the chat. So once again, guys, I want to thank you for joining us today and every Friday since we started this great community gathering on LinkedIn. So see you next Friday for more cultural experiences and inspiring connections here on LinkedIn every Friday at 5 p.m. Central European Time. And I want to know if you guys like this type of guest speaker. If you want to know more, if we can touch other subjects, let us know. And we would like to hear more from you. So please click on the link in the chat that goes to teams.withlocals.com if you want to know more. And have a nice weekend and see you next week. Bye-bye.